Welcome, Wargamers, to the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, because today we are talking about the Ghosts of Nocturne, a very special order of Space Marines, and the winner of the Pop Goes the Monkey homebrew lore competition that we talked about here on the channel. This went on for almost a month. Polling was awesome, and the Ghosts of Nocturne were selected to be brought to life by Pop Goes the Monkey with the slew of bits and different designs to kind of, bring them to life. So we're talking custom backpacks, some shoulder pads, vehicle upgrades, shields, and more. It was these guys who hosted the contest. Matt over at Pop Goes the Monkeys is absolutely crushing these designs. What a man of his word, already getting them produced. And so a massive congratulations over to Trevor for winning this thing. I hope it's all that you envisioned and that it looks stunning on the table. And we're going to talk about why this chapter was chosen as the winner in detail, because check this, this homebrew chapter has a rather detailed and well-written wiki page. I don't do a ton of stuff with the homebrew side of 40k, so this entire site that's like based around fan lore wiki was completely new to me, but dang. There is a mountain of information here, to the point where it could be indiscernible from an existing GW one just because of the amount of depth that's been added to it with historical events, ranks, occupations, that kind of thing. So absolutely stellar work here. So settle in, drag out your paints, and let's chat about why this chapter simply could not exist only within the realm of imagination and needed to be voted into reality. The links for Pop Goes the Monkey's page regarding the Ghosts of Nocturne, as well as that homebrew lore link that I described, are going to be in the description of this video, so be sure to hit up both of those. And if you're looking for any bits whatsoever for your army, I can personally attest Pop Goes the Monkey does incredible work. I have a bunch of their stuff in my Horus Heresy army, and Matt is an awesome guy. But with the preamble out of the way, who are the Ghosts of Nocturne? Well, there is actually a perfect synopsis at the top of their wiki, where it's kind of like a 3-sentence thing. The Ghosts of Nocturne is a loyalist Space Marine chapter composed entirely of Primaris Space Marines, created from the genetic lineage of the Salamanders and raised during the recent Ultima founding. These sons of Vulcan are experts in all manners stealth, emerging from shadows to deliver a swift and lethal strike to their foes before melting back into the darkness from whence they came. A fleet-based chapter, the Ghost of Nocturne patrol the Hellas sector inside the Segmentum Pacificus for any that would threaten the Imperium and its citizens. I just want to start off by saying that is the kind of short synopsis that makes it into like a codex entry as just being perfectly brief for giving you the picture of a chapter, but like, no, not getting bogged down in details. Like we're going to do now. Because we have a lot to unpack from that little blurb statement. First off, a few important things are laid out in the start of it. The Ultima founding is the big push to reinforce the Space Marines with the newly issued, Legion's numbers worth of Primaris Space Marines. Reboot Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was basically resurrected, came back, took command at Terra, and issued a decree to basically triple reinforce everything. This is when 40k had its big shakeup, introducing Primaris and stuff like that. And what we learned from that is some were battle ready, being basically kept in stasis, in somewhat small batches. Other small isolated groups were actually ready to begin accruing some level of combat experience. These were brand new Marines that did not have an official legion yet. They were still being created in mass. And so these Grey Shields, these unlegioned troops, were sent alongside Militarum, forces to act as their shock troops. And if you back out from it, essentially the Imperium is saying, well, this is the first batch of Primaris Marines for a new chapter, right? We're Ultima founding, we're making a whole bunch of new chapters, but the rest of them will take time. So this initial lot should go out and learn combat firsthand, going alongside the Astra Militarum, and that way we have some level of veteran, leadership, morale, experience, coordination, something like that for the Marines that were made while you were away. It's very practical. It's essentially how you establish the first company. It's very practical, and these Legionless Grey Shields served alongside Crusade Fleet Tertius's battle groups, Lambdax, under the command of the Raptor's 8th Captain, Aramis Corn. What that essentially means, battle group, because they don't have a chapter, the battle group is just what they're a part of, the nameless thing. In this case, battle group Lambdax, which could be a mix of all different kinds of forces, and this is just where they are stationed to gain experience. And these early Marines served with distinction at this point for a long while. Again, no chapter, just an unmarked battle group. After enough time had passed, we have some veteran experience, and the rest of the Primaris from this particular, gene lineage are being raised up. The time came for the Vulcan descendant Grey Shields of Battle Group Lambdax to be kind of elevated to the status of a full chapter, initially named the Spectral Flames. They were granted a modest but formidable fleet, and essentially they were tasked with defending some of the Imperial worlds in the Hellas sector within the Segmentum Pacificus. Now, I could not find any concrete lore about Hellas sector, Hellas, but we do know that the Segmentum Pacificus is to the left edge of the map here. So it's essentially the shallow edge of the galaxy in relation to Terra and the end of the Milky Way. But it is known to kind of host a bunch of Xenos intruders from time to time, chaos cults, of course. And so this is really the moment where this theoretical chapter levels up to becoming a full one. Right? Those early veterans are giving supporting troops a fleet to ferry them around. And at this point, it's interesting as a topic because anyone can look at them and clearly discern that they are Vulcan descendants. It's made very plain by the pigment mutations that all salamanders have. If you're unfamiliar, Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, Legion, and then later on all the different chapters that spawned from it, had like ashen black skin. Essentially, it was his pigment reacting to the radiation on his world, and so he had like truly charred wood, matte black skin. So we don't need Maury Povich over here to know who the father is, right? Because it's very clear. Okay, so they're clearly Salamander descendant, but they haven't met the Salamanders yet. Not only that, because these early lessons in war were very, very specific, being used as shock troops or infiltrators and stuff like that, it left a thumbprint, I guess you could say, on the military foundation of this new group. Like I said, they're clearly Salamander descendant, who haven't met the Salamanders, and they're evolving their own history, their own honors, their own battle doctrines apart from them. And we get the sense that the Spectral Flames existed as a self-sufficient chapter for some time. Fleet-based, but eyeing up prospective new worlds to claim consistent genetic stock for their own use. At one point much later on, a delegate of Salamanders appears. And it's like long-lost relatives that are total strangers meeting again. Initially, the Salamanders are taken aback by how gaunt these Primaris look. Like, both sides have that ashen black skin, but the Salamanders look healthy, where the Spectral Flames almost seem wiry by comparison. Their skin has this scarred nature to it that seems kind of unsettling, like, why are you guys all covered in so many scars? Which we will get to, but also their combat doctrines. The Spectral Flames had developed an emphasis on infiltration and lightning assaults, essentially strike and fade attacks that destroyed an enemy's ability to respond, whereas traditional Salamanders, the chapter, tend to be a bit more direct. And by direct, I mean, I'm going to direct a flamethrower at you from like 10 feet away in the open. That's a bit hyperbolic, but you know what I mean. Like, it was just a notable difference in how they approach problems. And so there's a lot of points of tension in them trying to understand one another. However, the Salamander's delegation brought something else. It brought tradition and philosophies and teachings and a flavor of chapter compliance that the Spectral Flames took greedily. And we get this moment where a chapter that's been desperately trying to develop its own identity meets up with some of the most esteemed Space Marines and are told, hey, this is how you win. This is how you can be a hero like us. And for the recipient of that information, you're like, yes, please. Right? If you're going to copy anything, it's going to be your lineage from a long time ago, right? Your genetic relative, who is one of the most esteemed and beloved Space Marine chapters ever. And so this forms a milestone of identity development for this fledgling chapter. And so when the emissaries of the Salamanders, gave all this information, talked about the Promethean cult, helped them restructure when it comes to like the Salamander's specific rights and things like that. The delegation is leaving, and the chapter master here decided that they would be renamed to the Ghosts of Nocturne in honor of their new brotherhood with their Nocturian gene siblings. I have a quote here from the wiki. It says, "The name was inspired by the words of the Salamander's chapter master Tushan when speaking of the nature of the new successor chapter. Quote, they move without sending sound and strike without warning. They are like ghosts stepping from the shadows, as if appearing from thin air, melting back into nothingness when the task is done. Thus, the Ghosts of Nocturne were born, developed and brought into the fold as an Ultima founding Space Marine successor of the Salamanders. Now, as an army, what they look like now, the Ghosts of Nocturne, they're still trying to figure it out. We still very much get the idea that this is a fledgling chapter who's trying to make its name in its little part of the universe. As it's written about, we have the idea that they are just now beginning to establish a fortress monastery, kind of looking at potential planets. One in particular is Vespera 4. And that process of, designating a planet, getting the planetary governor to sign off on all the things, making sure the genetic stock is right there, what you need, all that takes time, and they're not really on a clock. The process is just getting started, and they were created with reserves. So they're a fleet-based chapter right now, and that's totally fine for them because they want a place to settle down that's going to be consistent for a long time. They are mostly a Codex-compliant chapter, as the Salamanders are, of course. And so what that means internally is that you have your, chapter command. Your first company is sort of your honor guard, your interminators, heavy hitters, whatever you need. Certainly the most veteran and kind of gray-bearded of your lot. A lot of these are the OG Grey Shields from before this was actually even a chapter. So there are people here who remember what it's like to not have an identity. There are several battle companies, which are just, your independent Space Marine armies that you can build. Then you have support companies where they can take assets from. Where really the only place that things diverge from the Codex Astartes is when you get to the 10th company. For most chapters, this is where your scouts go. And so this is where new recruits, neophytes can be put into the 10th company, and they can be deployed in stealth, gain valuable battle experience while they finish up the process of becoming full Space Marines. All the indoctrination and genetic manipulation and organs and all this kind of stuff. But in this context, for the Ghosts of Nocturne, they do not have a ton of scouts, or even Marines in development. They don't have those things yet, and so the 10th company was essentially repurposed as a kind of unique strike company. In keeping with the battle doctrines of the chapter, the 10th company is made up of the stealthiest and the most independent Marines that the chapter has. These are the kind of squads that can be deployed with the most minimal support to cripple the enemy, while the first company and the rest of the army hits the field en masse. So everything else functions the same, it's just that they've relegated these strike companies specifically to the 10th. But the rest of it functions a lot like a normal chapter. Now there is one more thing to them, kind of their culture, their ethos as a group that we need to talk about, and I kind of hinted at it before, and that is the scars. Well, that's a tradition that the Ghosts of Nocturne on their own have developed known as the cleansing. As the now Ghosts of Nocturne were introduced to the wisdom of the Promethean cult of the Salamanders, they kind of took it in their own unique way. For the same reason that we can have very different religious groups that all cite the same religious text, right? How you express those things that you intake can be different. The cleansing is a regular ritual that Marines of this chapter perform where essentially you sit on a dais, your servant drips ceremonial oils all over you, and you get lit up on fire. Now, they aren't going to die. These are Space Marines. This isn't like Prometheum fuel that's going to singe them. It's just, kerosene or something like that. It's not enough to permanently damage their bodies. They can heal through it. But the idea is this purifying flame has worked into the chapter ethos. It's meant to focus the warrior, refine their mental control and mastery of their own sensations. Feel the pain, remain focused throughout it. The better you are at handling the cleansing and demonstrating your mental acuity, focus, and determination, that's going to see you rise or fall within the chapter. Now on the battlefield, as we mentioned numerous times here, these are infiltrators and stealth fighters. which may have just started as a training method, but has become a real strength given the relatively small size of the chapter and their influence. Right, when they're left alone in the Segmentum Pacificus, and all you have is a small handful of veterans, with an asterisk, right? To even call them veterans is maybe a bit too much. So all of that combined, you have to fight smart and not hard. And as far as their heraldry and the color scheme, we are looking at a largely steel on black scheme with accents of flame being on the shoulder, and there's sometimes flames on the bolter, which I think is super rad. But like I said, otherwise largely Codex compliant. So if you want to build this army, why wouldn't you? Between the shoulder pads on Pop Goes the Monkey and Salamander bits, you have a ton going on. And that's actually something I want to shout out to the winner here, because they also got a fat gift certificate to Pop Goes the Monkey. Do not limit yourself to Ghosts of Nocturne things, because the Dragonfire Legions page also has a ton of great weapons, helmets, and more that would absolutely fit thematically. Because they are Codex compliant, so they would have access to all the same things, and they are also adapting the Promethean cult. However much you want to steal from a Salamander inspiration army, it's theirs for you. And so I want to end this video like I end all of them, by simply saying, why is this cool? Well, first off, congrats on winning, genuinely. I love seeing others succeed. It makes me so happy. You won this contest, but the contest exists because Matt and Pop Goes the Monkey have been here for 10 years. Both y'all are winners. You'll love to see it. Moving to the lore-specific stuff, though, identity is always a great topic for these fantasy and sci-fi settings. And here, it's a very interesting one, right? They were made bereft of chapter identity, even though it was very clear who they genetically descended from. That did not translate into their doctrine or tradition, until they were reunited with their brothers and embraced this shared identity of their Primarch. But there's evolution happened where they just took it in a very unique way. And this evolution of identity here makes them unique even to their closest relatives. I like the mix of distinct and complementary traits here when you're talking about salamanders, right? They don't fight like salamanders, but they do conduct themselves as such. So just like salamanders, they're lauded as the defenders of humanity to the point of self-sacrifice. The Ghosts of Nocturne are the same. They are deeply revered and respected by all the Imperium branches they've worked alongside, but their differences manifest on the battlefield. The kind of support that they offer those allies and stuff will feel different than if the actual salamanders were there. In total, this was a fascinating chapter to learn about and will make a fine addition to the Pop Goes the Monkey lore universe, which has several other fun and interesting chapters amongst its ranks. One last big congrats to the winner here, and a big thank you to Pop Goes the Monkey, not only for running this event and including me, but for 10 years of great service in an industry that can never get enough. Good people, good creators, and awesome small business owners within it. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I will catch you in my next video. Happy wargaming, friends!